"There is a bomb in your office," the little black girl whispered. Her voice was so soft that at first no one was sure if she had really spoken. The boardroom on the 82nd floor fell silent. The hum of the air vents stopped feeling like background noise and started sounding like a countdown. The billionaire looked up from his papers, startled. The morning light glinted off the glass table, off the chrome edges of the digital screen showing endless charts and graphs. Everyone in the room turned toward the child. She looked out of place, her pink hoodie slightly torn, her sneakers scuffed, a small cloth bag clutched tightly against her chest. The assistant rushed toward her. "Sweetheart, you cannot be here," he said, trying to sound calm. But the girl did not move. She took one step closer to the man at the head of the table. "Please, sir," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "You have to listen to me. It is true." "No." A faint laugh came from the back of the room. The billionaire's fiancée, standing near the window in a fitted blue dress, crossed her arms. "A bomb?" she said. "This is absurd." The girl looked at her, then back at the man in the chair. "I heard them last night," she whispered. "They said it would happen before everyone arrived today." The assistant tried to take her by the arm, but the billionaire raised his hand to stop him. He could see the fear in her eyes, not wild panic, but something deeper certainty. "What did you hear exactly?" he asked. The girl swallowed hard. "Two voices," she said. "They were talking about your office. They said you would not make it through the morning." Silence spread again, heavy and sharp. The hum of the city below seemed to vanish. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed faintly, then disappeared. The fiancée forced another laugh, but her smile no longer reached her eyes. The billionaire looked at her, then back at the girl. He could feel his heartbeat, slow but heavy, echoing in his chest. "Please," the girl said, almost in a whisper again, "check under your desk." No one spoke. The man hesitated, then pushed his chair back. Papers fluttered to the floor as he crouched down. For a brief second, there was nothing. Then he saw it something small, wired, blinking faintly in the shadows beneath the table. He froze. When he stood up again, his face had lost all color. The little girl's whisper was no longer a mystery. It was the truth that had just saved his life. The moment the billionaire saw the blinking red light beneath his desk, time seemed to collapse into silence. He did not breathe. No one in the room moved. The small light kept flashing, a steady pulse against the shadowed wood. For the first time in years, the man who controlled empires and decided markets felt something he could not control: fear. The assistant took a step backward. "Sir, what is that?" His voice cracked as the words left his mouth. The billionaire did not answer. He slowly stood up, his hand trembling as he pointed to the floor. "Get everyone out," he said quietly. His tone carried no argument. The assistant and the executives rushed toward the door, their footsteps echoing against the marble tiles. The little girl stayed still. She did not scream or cry. She simply stood there, clutching her cloth bag, her eyes fixed on the blinking light as if she had known it would be there all along. The fiancée spoke up, her voice high and shaky. "It cannot be real," she said. "Someone is playing a trick, a child's imagination." The billionaire turned to her sharply. "Do not move." His voice was deep, steady, and colder than the glass walls around them. He looked at the girl again. "You said you heard them. Who did you hear?" The child took a breath. "Two people," she said softly. "A man and a woman. They were near the loading dock at the back of the building. I was walking home with my friend when we heard them talking. They said it would be done by morning." His throat felt dry. "Did you recognize their voices?" The girl shook her head. "Only the woman's," she said. "He will be sitting right there, reading his papers, and it will all be over before anyone knows." The billionaire's eyes darkened. Slowly, he turned toward his fiancée. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Before he could say anything, the door burst open. Two security officers ran in, followed by a technician carrying a metal case. One of the guards looked at the billionaire. "Sir, we received the emergency signal." "What is happening?" He pointed to the desk. "There is something under there. It is blinking." The technician crouched down carefully, shining a small flashlight. When the beam touched the device, the man gasped. "Sir, please step back. It is a live explosive." The room filled with the sound of radios crackling. of orders being shouted. More guards entered, guiding everyone toward the exit. The girl stayed behind, her small hand gripping the strap of her bag. She looked calm, almost too calm for a child her age. The billionaire walked toward her. "How did you know to come here?" "I did not want anyone to get hurt," she said. "I thought maybe they were lying, but then I heard them laugh." "What did they say when they laughed?" "They said no one would ever believe a kid if I tried to tell." Her words hit him harder than any explosion could have. He looked around the room, the walls of glass, the screens, the polished floor, and realized how far he had been from the world that this child lived in. The technician stood up, his face tense. "It is definitely a bomb. I can disarm it, but we need to clear the floor immediately." The billionaire nodded. "Do it." He turned to the girl. "You are coming with me." As they stepped into the hallway, alarms began to sound through the building. Red lights flashed against the walls. The elevator doors opened, but the guards directed everyone to the stairwell. The billionaire held the girl's hand tightly as they moved down flight after flight of stairs. She never complained, never asked to stop. When they reached the street, the noise of the city returned: sirens, horns, and the hum of life going on above the fear. Fire trucks and police cars surrounded the tower. The crowd outside stared, phones raised, recording every moment. The billionaire turned to one of his security men. "Find out who has access to my office. Every cleaner, every contractor, every visitor." His voice was firm but low. The girl stood beside him, her eyes wide as she watched the chaos around them. "Are they going to stop it?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said. "They will stop it now." Minutes felt like hours. Then, from above, a voice came through the guard's radio. "Device secured. No detonation. Repeat, the device has been disarmed." The billionaire closed his eyes for a second. The weight in his chest loosened. He looked down at the girl. "You saved every person in that building," he said. She shook her head. "I just said what I heard." He smiled faintly, the first real smile he had shown in a long time. Sometimes that is the hardest thing to do. But even as relief swept through the crowd, his eyes moved toward the tower's upper floors. Through the glass windows, he saw movement, a shadow that should not have been there. His fiancée was still upstairs. "Stay here," he told the girl. "Do not move." He started toward the building, but the girl's small voice stopped him. "Be careful, sir. I think she was one of the voices." He froze. The words echoed in his mind as he looked back at the tower, where the woman he trusted most was still inside. In that moment, he realized that the whisper of a child had not only saved his life, it had just uncovered the beginning of a truth he was not ready to face. The billionaire's heart was pounding as he looked up at the glass tower that stretched into the gray morning sky. The building he had built with pride now felt like a stranger, cold, dangerous, and full of secrets he had never noticed. The sirens still wailed, echoing off the metal and glass. Police officers were shouting orders, trying to hold back the crowd that had gathered on the street. The little black girl stood a few feet away from him, her small hands folded over the cloth bag, her eyes fixed on the tower. He could still hear her voice in his head. "I think she was one of the voices." Those words struck deeper than the sight of the bomb itself. He wanted to deny it, to believe that the woman he loved could not be capable of something so cruel. But the child's calm certainty made denial impossible. A police officer approached him. "Sir, the upper floors are still being checked. We found one device under your desk, but the technician says the wiring suggests there might have been more planned." The billionaire nodded slowly. "Where is my fiancée?" "She is still upstairs. She refused to leave during the evacuation," the officer said. "Said she was helping your staff." The billionaire glanced toward the child again. Her face remained still, but her eyes followed every movement inside the building, as if she could sense something others could not. He knelt beside her, lowering his voice. "You said you heard two people talking. Was the woman giving orders?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "She told the man to make sure you sat at the desk. She said it had to look like an accident." The words made the billionaire's blood run cold. He stood, turning toward the entrance, where smoke and dust drifted from the open lobby doors. "I am going back up," he said. The officer stepped in front of him. "Sir, that is not safe." "She is still up there," he replied quietly, "and I need answers." The little girl reached out, tugging at the sleeve of his jacket. "Be careful. She looked scared when you found the bomb, but not like someone who was afraid of dying." more like someone afraid of being caught. He gave her a brief nod. "Stay with the officers. I will come back." He walked through the glass doors, climbing the emergency stairs 2 at a time. The higher he went, the stronger the smell of smoke became. His lungs burned, but his mind was sharper than it had been in years. Each floor reminded him of the life he had built, the power, the money, the admiration. And now, in the space of a few whispers, it all felt like paper waiting to catch fire. When he reached the 82nd floor, the hallway was empty. The large conference room door was half open. Papers were scattered across the floor where the explosion team had worked. The lights flickered slightly. He stepped inside. His fiancée stood near the window, staring out at the city. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her phone trembled in her hand. When she turned, her face was calm again, almost too calm. "You should not be here," she said. "The police said it is not safe." "I had to be," he replied. His voice was low but steady. "There are some things that need to be said face to face." She gave a nervous smile. "I cannot believe someone planted a bomb. Who would want—" The billionaire stood outside the glass tower, his breath shallow as he watched the blinking lights of emergency vehicles reflect off the mirrored walls. The sound of sirens mixed with the low hum of engines and the whispers of the growing crowd. Police officers moved people back, forming a tight perimeter around the building. The morning air was cool, sharp, and filled with the kind of tension that made every second stretch longer than it should. Beside him, the little black girl stood quietly. She held her cloth bag close to her chest, her small fingers gripping the worn strap. The billionaire looked down at her, still trying to understand how this child had known what none of his security systems had detected. Her eyes were steady, calm in a way that unsettled him. He crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "You said you heard a woman's voice," he said. "Are you sure it was her?" The girl nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I remember her voice. She sounded angry, like she hated you. She said you would not see the sunrise." The billionaire straightened, his jaw tightening. The woman he was supposed to marry was still inside the building. He wanted to believe there was another explanation, but every instinct told him the child's words were true. He turned toward the nearest police officer. "She is still up there," he said. "My fiancée. You need to find her." The officer lifted his radio, speaking quickly to the team inside. A moment later, a voice replied, "We are checking the upper floors now." The billionaire looked back at the tower. He could see faint movements through the glass, small flashes of reflection, shadows shifting between lights. Every flicker made his pulse quicken. A security guard approached. "Sir, the device has been disarmed completely. The technician confirmed it was set to detonate within 10 minutes. Whoever placed it knew your schedule." He nodded, though his face showed no relief. "Where did it come from?" The guard hesitated. "We do not know yet, but someone had access to your private office." His thoughts turned cold. Only 3 people had access to that office: himself, his assistant, and his fiancée. The little girl looked up at him again. "I told you she was afraid when she saw me," she said softly. She looked like she wanted to run. He glanced down at her, realizing how much she had seen details that even adults might have missed. "You are very observant," he said quietly. She shrugged. "I just pay attention. People say things when they think no one is listening." The billionaire's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from his head of security. "We have her." She was trying to leave through the south exit. He exhaled slowly. The words were simple, but the meaning cut deep. The woman he trusted most had tried to run. He looked at the girl. "Stay with the officers," he said gently. "I will be right back." The girl hesitated. "Be careful," she said. "She might still have something." He nodded, then followed 2 officers toward the entrance of the building. The marble lobby was nearly empty, the sound of his footsteps echoing against the walls. Smoke from the disarmed device still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with the metallic scent of dust. They led him toward the service corridor near the back of the building. There, surrounded by police, stood his fiancée. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wide with panic. When she saw him, she straightened, forcing a shaky smile. "I was scared," she said quickly. "I just wanted to get out." He stopped a few feet away. "You were trying to leave through a restricted exit," he said. His tone was calm, almost too calm. I did not know what else to do, she said, her voice trembling. Everything was chaos. The lead officer stepped forward. We found this in her bag, he said, holding up a small flash drive sealed in a plastic case. We believe it contains building schematics and access codes. The billionaire's stomach turned. Why would you have that? He asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears welled in her eyes. You do not understand, she whispered. They made me do it. They said they would ruin everything if I did not. Who is they? He demanded. Before she could answer, a faint voice called from behind them. The little girl had followed, standing just beyond the police line. Her small voice carried across the corridor. She is lying, she said. Everyone turned toward her. The child stepped closer, her face pale but steady. She was not afraid of anyone else, the girl said. She was afraid of being caught. The fiancé's face hardened. What do you know, little one? She hissed. The girl's voice remained calm. I know what I heard. You said he would not make it through the morning. You said it was the only way to get everything you wanted. Silence filled the hall. The billionaire stared at the woman, seeing her clearly for the first time. The truth sat between them like glass sharp, undeniable. The fiancée began to cry, covering her face with her hands. I did not mean for it to go that far, she sobbed. They promised it would only scare you, but no one moved to comfort her. The police took her arm gently, guiding her away. The billionaire turned back toward the girl. You stopped this, he said quietly. You saved me. She looked up at him, her voice small but certain. Sometimes people just need to listen. Outside, the sunlight had grown warmer, spreading across the city. The sirens were fading now, replaced by the sounds of morning traffic, returning to normal. As he watched the girl step into the light, the billionaire realized that her whisper had done more than save his life. It had pulled truth out of the shadows and changed everything he thought he knew about the world he ruled. The crowd outside the tower had begun to thin, but the noise of sirens still echoed between the tall buildings. Reporters had gathered near the police barricades, calling out questions that no one answered. The billionaire stood near a patrol car, his suit jacket folded over his arm, his face pale beneath the bright sunlight. The world around him moved quickly, but inside he felt slow, heavy, and quiet. The truth was too sharp to process all at once. His fiancée was in custody now. The police had led her away in silence, her face hidden behind her hands. The last words she had spoken echoed in his mind. They promised it would only scare you. Whoever they were, he knew it was not over. There were still pieces missing, pieces that the little girl had somehow understood before anyone else. The girl stood a few steps away from him, holding a bottle of water that one of the officers had given her. The wind tugged at her hoodie, lifting strands of her hair. She looked small, almost fragile, but her eyes stayed steady on the tower that glistened behind them. He turned toward her and spoke softly. You have been very brave. She shrugged a little, still watching the building. I just said what I heard. He knelt slightly so they could look at each other directly. Most people would have run away, he said. You did not. She looked down at the sidewalk, scuffing her shoe against the concrete. My grandmother says when you hear something that could hurt people, you have to tell someone, she said, even if they do not believe you. He felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in years. It was the quiet ache of humility. Your grandmother sounds very wise, he said. She is, the girl answered. She always says that the truth whispers before it shouts. Those words stayed with him. They reminded him of how easily he had ignored quiet signs in his own life. The moments when he had chosen comfort over conscience, when he had believed money could replace trust. He looked back toward the glass building, his reflection faint in the mirrored walls. For the first time, he did not like what he saw. A police officer approached. Sir, the device has been taken to our lab, the officer said. We will trace its components and check the security footage. It should help us find out who she was working with. The billionaire nodded. Thank you. The officer hesitated, then added, The child will need to give a statement too. Do you want us to arrange that now? He looked at the girl. She has been through enough for one day, he said. Let her rest first. I will bring her when she is ready. The officer nodded and stepped back toward the line of patrol cars. The billionaire looked around the scene again. The sunlight glinted off the fire trucks and the glass doors. His life had changed in a matter of hours, yet the city kept moving, indifferent and loud. He turned back to the girl. "You should not have to walk home alone," he said. "Where do you live?" She hesitated before answering. "On the east side," she said, "near the old train yard." He frowned slightly. That was almost 5 miles away. "Let me take you home," he said. "It is the least I can do." The girl looked uncertain, but she finally nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. They rode together in the back seat of a police car. The city rolled past the windows, streets filled with people who had no idea how close they had been to disaster. The billionaire glanced at the girl. She was looking out the window, her small hand pressed against the glass, her eyes following the sky. "What is your name?" he asked gently. She turned toward him. "My name is Ava," she said. He smiled faintly. "Ava," he repeated. "That is a strong name." She smiled back, but only a little. "My mom picked it," she said. "She said it means life." He looked away for a moment, feeling a sting in his chest. Life, that was what she had given him back today. When the car stopped in front of a narrow apartment building, Ava opened the door and stepped out. The street was quiet, lined with small shops and cracked sidewalks. She turned back to face him. "Thank you for believing me," she said. He shook his head. "It is I who should thank you," he said. "You changed everything today." Ava gave a shy nod, then walked toward the stairwell. Before she disappeared inside, she turned once more and said, "You should not trust people who smile too easily." He watched her go, her small figure swallowed by the dim hallway of the building. The police car pulled away, but his eyes stayed on that doorway long after it had closed. Back in his office later that afternoon, the billionaire sat alone. The glass walls were spotless, the desk cleared, the blinking light gone. Yet the silence felt different now. He opened his laptop, searching for the list of security clearances, reviewing every name that had access to the building. Halfway through the list, he stopped. One entry caught his eye, a name he had not seen in years. It belonged to someone who should not have access anymore, someone connected to his fiancée's old business partners. His jaw tightened. The truth was deeper than betrayal. This was a plan. As he stared at the glowing screen, he could almost hear Ava's voice again, quiet and steady. The truth whispers before it shouts. He finally understood. The whisper had only begun. The shout was still coming. Night came early that evening. The city lights shimmered like restless stars against the glass of the tall tower. Inside his office, the billionaire sat alone, his hands folded tightly in front of him. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. The chaos of the day had settled, but the questions had not. The fiancé was still being questioned by the police, and the bomb had been safely removed. But something about the way it all happened still felt wrong. It was too clean, too perfectly timed. He had built his empire on logic, but this day had been built on fear, and fear left a different kind of trace. He leaned forward and studied the list of access logs glowing on his computer screen. Each entry carried a name, a date, and a time. Most were routine security staff, cleaning crews, technicians, but one entry stopped him cold. It was a name he had not seen in almost 6 years. Evan Miles. The man had been a former partner, brilliant, ambitious, and dangerously reckless. Years ago, Evan had been caught leaking confidential data to competitors and was fired immediately. The billionaire had pressed charges, and Evan had disappeared after serving a short sentence. There had been rumors he fled the country. So how was his name on the system again? He called his head of security. Who reinstated access for Evan Miles? There was silence on the line, followed by confusion. "Sir, no one has. That clearance was deactivated years ago. Are you sure it appeared today?" He stared at the screen. "It did. Less than 24 hours ago." The voice on the other end grew serious. "I will check the servers right now. Someone may have breached our network." He hung up and leaned back, the tension tightening in his chest. The pieces were starting to connect. The fiancée had always spoken of business debts from before they met. She had introduced new consultants into his circle, people he barely noticed. It was possible Evan Miles was one of them. The door opened quietly. His assistant, a tall man with tired eyes, stepped in. "Sir, the media wants a statement," he said softly. "They are asking about the girl. They want to know who she is." The billionaire shook his head. No, not a single word about her. She deserves peace. The assistant nodded and hesitated. Understood. Also, the police would like to speak with her again tomorrow. They said they will handle it gently. He looked out the window, watching the city glow. I will make sure she gets there safely, he said. When the assistant left, the billionaire remained still. He thought of Ava, her calm voice, her steady eyes, the way she had stood her ground when everyone else panicked. She had seen what others had missed, and now she was the only one who could confirm the voices she heard that night. He picked up his phone and called his driver. Tomorrow morning, we will go to the east side again, he said. The next morning, gray clouds hung low over the city. The billionaire's car pulled up in front of Ava's building. The neighborhood was quiet, still damp from early rain. He stepped out and waited near the entrance. After a few minutes, Ava appeared, wearing a clean blue jacket and holding her cloth bag. Good morning, he said. She nodded politely. Good morning, sir. Are you ready to go to the station? She nodded again, but her face was thoughtful. I dreamed about her, she said suddenly. The lady who was going to marry you. She was talking to someone on the phone. She said, he has to pay for what he did. He looked at her closely. Did you hear that in real life, or just in the dream? The girl frowned a little. Sometimes dreams are just things you remember late, she said, but I think I heard it for real. They rode in silence for a while. The sound of the car engine filled the space between them. When they arrived at the police station, an officer greeted them kindly and led them to a small, quiet room. Ava sat on the chair, her feet barely touching the floor. The detective smiled gently. You have been very helpful, Ava, she said. Can you tell us anything else about the voices you heard that night? Ava thought carefully before answering. The man sounded scared, she said. He said, it is not what we agreed. And then the lady said, do it anyway. The detective wrote down her words slowly, then looked up at the billionaire. This helps us a lot, she said. We can compare this with the recordings we recovered from the building's cameras. Some of the audio might match her description. The billionaire nodded with gratitude. Thank you. After the interview, as they stepped outside, the gray clouds began to part, and a pale light filtered through. The city seemed quieter now. Ava tugged gently at his sleeve. Will she go to jail? She asked. Yes, he said softly. If she truly planned it, she will. The girl looked down for a moment. Sometimes people do bad things because they think they have no choice, she said. He looked at her with a hint of surprise. Do you really believe that? She nodded slowly. My mom used to say people make mistakes when they forget who they were before they got scared. Her words sank deep into him. He realized that the woman who betrayed him might have also been pulled by fear, by someone else's manipulation, but that did not erase what she had done. When they arrived back at the car, Ava looked up at him again. You are not angry anymore, she said. He smiled faintly. I am tired of being angry, he said. I think I just want to understand. As the car drove away from the police station, sunlight spread across the city streets. The day felt lighter, but the shadow of truth still lingered somewhere behind them, waiting for its next whisper. The next morning arrived quiet but tense. The billionaire had not slept much. He had spent the night reviewing old files, security footage, and contracts that connected his company to people he no longer trusted. Every document seemed to carry a shadow, every name a secret he had missed. The city outside his window was beginning to wake, but his world felt smaller, heavier. He stood by the tall glass pane, looking down at the street far below. Cars moved like silver veins through the city. For the first time, he did not see power or profit in that view. He saw how fragile everything was, how one whisper from a child had undone years of certainty. His phone buzzed. It was a message from the police department. New evidence recovered. Please come to headquarters at 10 o'clock. He looked at the clock. It was only 8:30. He had time. He called his driver. We will pick up Ava first, he said. When he arrived at her neighborhood, she was already waiting outside, sitting on the steps with her cloth bag beside her. She waved shyly as the car stopped. He stepped out and opened the door for her. Good morning, Ava, he said. Good morning, she replied, her voice gentle but curious. Did they find something? They might have, he said. They want to talk to both of us again. Ava climbed into the car, buckling her seatbelt carefully. I dreamed about the voice again, she said after a moment. It was clearer this time. The man said, "He took everything from me." The billionaire's chest tightened. That voice could only belong to one person, Evan Miles. He turned to her, his tone calm. "Did you hear anything else?" She shook her head. "Only that." Then it got quiet again. They rode in silence after that. When they reached the police station, an officer met them at the door. "We found something interesting," he said. "You both need to see this." He led them into a small viewing room where a monitor was set up. On the screen, grainy footage showed the service corridor behind the tower. The sound was muffled but clear enough to recognize the voices. The detective adjusted the volume. The man's voice came first, rough, tense, and low. "He ruined me. He deserves to lose everything." Then came the woman's voice. "You will get your chance. He will not even see it coming." The billionaire felt a chill move through him. He knew that voice too well. It was the voice of the woman he had loved and trusted. Ava watched the screen without blinking. "That is them," she said softly. "That is what I heard that night." The detective paused the footage and turned to the billionaire. "The man is Evan Miles," she confirmed. "The woman is your fiancée. They planned this together. But there is more. He did not leave the country after his release. We believe he has been hiding under a different name and using contacts inside your company." The billionaire stared at the screen. The truth was sharp, but it was also freeing. For weeks he had wondered if there was something wrong with him for not noticing the danger sooner. Now he knew. The betrayal had been calculated, built from lies and hidden names. He looked at Ava. "You were right," he said quietly. "Every word you said was true." She looked up at him, her dark eyes calm and clear. "Sometimes people listen too late," she said. "But you still have time to fix it." He nodded slowly. "I will." After leaving the police station, they stopped by a small cafe near the river. The air smelled of fresh bread and coffee. It was the first calm moment either of them had felt in days. They sat by the window. Ava ordered a cup of warm milk, and he ordered coffee but barely touched it. He studied her as she looked out the window, her face lit by soft sunlight. "Do you ever get scared, Ava?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Sometimes. But my grandmother says, being scared just means something matters." He smiled faintly. "She sounds like someone I would like to meet." Ava stirred her milk and looked at him again. "Maybe one day you will." She likes people who tell the truth. The billionaire's smile faded into something more thoughtful. "Then I will have to keep trying." They finished their drinks and walked back toward the car. The street outside was full of life children running to school, vendors calling out, buses honking in the distance. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire felt connected to it all. He was no longer looking down from his tower. He was standing in it. When they reached the car, his phone rang. It was the detective again. "Sir, we have located Evan Miles," she said. "He is at an old warehouse on the north side near the docks. We are preparing a team now." The billionaire looked down at Ava. "They found him," he said. Her expression turned serious. "Are you going to go there?" "Yes," he said. "I have to. It is time to finish this." Ava's small hand tightened around her cloth bag. "Be careful," she whispered. He sounded angry in the recording. Angry people do not think straight. He gave a small nod. "Neither do guilty ones," he said. As they drove toward the docks, the sky grew darker, thick with clouds that seemed to mirror the weight in his chest. The wind off the water carried the scent of salt and metal. The city that once belonged entirely to him now felt like a battlefield between truth and deceit. Beside him, Ava sat quietly, watching the world move past. She said nothing, but her presence was steady, grounding. He glanced at her and thought of what she had told him the first time they met. The truth whispers before it shouts. Now, as the car turned down the narrow road toward the docks, he knew the whisper had become a storm, and before the day ended, that storm would reveal everything. The sky above the docks was heavy with clouds, gray and swollen with rain that had not yet fallen. The air smelled of salt, oil, and old iron. The billionaire's car rolled to a stop beside a row of abandoned warehouses. The buildings stood like silent giants, their metal walls streaked with rust, their windows broken. It was the kind of place where forgotten things stayed forgotten. Inside the car, Ava sat quietly, her small hands folded over her cloth bag. She looked out the window, her eyes scanning the dark shapes in the distance. "It looks like the kind of place where people hide," she said softly. He nodded, keeping his gaze fixed on the warehouse ahead. "Yes," he said. "That is exactly what he is doing." 2 police cars were already parked nearby. Officers stood in small groups, their radios crackling with short bursts of static. The detective from earlier approached the car as the billionaire stepped out. "We have surrounded the building," she said. "There is only one entrance that is not sealed. Our team believes he is still inside." The fiancée confirmed that he contacted her from here 2 nights ago. "Nzel." The billionaire's expression stayed calm, but his pulse quickened. "Do you think he will talk?" "If he thinks it will save him, yes," the detective replied, "but he might be desperate." Ava had stepped out of the car too. She stood a few feet away, looking up at the tall warehouse. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I can hear something," she said. The detective frowned. "What do you mean, Ava?" The girl tilted her head slightly, listening. "Someone is talking inside," she said. "It sounds like he is crying." The detective exchanged a quick glance with one of the officers. "We are not hearing anything on our sensors," she said. Ava took a slow step forward. "He is saying he did not want to do it," she murmured. "He keeps saying he is sorry." The billionaire looked at the detective. "Let me go in first," he said. "He knows me. He will not talk to anyone else." The detective hesitated. "That is not safe, sir. He could be armed." I will not get too close," the billionaire said firmly. "If he sees a crowd of officers, he might panic." After a long pause, the detective nodded reluctantly. "You have 2 minutes," she said. "We will be right behind you." The billionaire walked toward the warehouse entrance, the gravel crunching softly under his shoes. The metal door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and stale, filled with the scent of dust and old machinery. The dim light from the broken windows revealed scattered tools, wooden crates, and a few overturned chairs. He took a cautious step inside. "Evan," he called, his voice low but steady. "I know you are here." There was no answer at first, only the faint echo of his own words. Then, from the shadows near the far wall, a figure moved. A man stepped forward slowly, his clothes torn and dirty, his face thin and pale. It was Evan Miles. "You should not have come here," Evan said, his voice trembling. The billionaire stopped a few feet away. "I had to," he said. "I needed to know why." Evan laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Why? You took everything from me. My job, my name, my future. You left me with nothing but debts and anger. You did that to yourself," the billionaire said quietly. "You stole from the company. You betrayed your team." Evan's eyes burned. "I was trying to survive," he said. "You never cared about anyone but yourself." For a moment, neither man spoke. The sound of waves hitting the dock echoed through the empty space. "I could have forgiven you," the billionaire said finally, "but you tried to kill me." Evan's hands shook. "I did not want to," he said. "She said it was only to scare you. She said no one would get hurt." "Then why the bomb?" the billionaire asked. Evan's voice broke. "Because she lied to me too." Before the billionaire could respond, the metal door behind them opened slightly. The detective's voice called out, "Sir, are you all right?" Evan flinched. "Do not let them take me," he said desperately. "Please." The billionaire held up a hand toward the doorway. "Wait," he said to the detective. Then he looked at Evan again. "If you tell them everything, they will listen. This is your only chance to make it right." Evan sank to his knees, his voice barely a whisper. "It is too late." The billionaire took a careful step closer. "It is not," he said softly. "You are still breathing. That means there is still time to choose the truth." Evan looked up at him, eyes wet, face pale. "The truth," he repeated. "She was not working alone. There were others. They wanted control of your company. They promised me money, but they were using me." The billionaire's stomach tightened. "Who are they?" Evan shook his head weakly. "I only knew one name. They called him Gray." Before the billionaire could ask more, The detective entered the room with 2 officers. They moved quickly but carefully, handcuffing Evan without struggle. He did not resist. As they let him out, the billionaire followed, his mind spinning with the new name. Outside, Ava stood waiting near the car. When she saw him, she asked quietly, "Did he tell you the truth?" He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "But it was only part of it." Ava looked up at the dark sky, where the first drops of rain began to fall. "The rest will come," she said. "Truth never hides forever." The billionaire glanced toward the horizon, where thunder rumbled softly in the distance. The storm was finally beginning, and he knew that whatever came next, the whisper that had started all of this had only just begun to echo. The rain began to fall harder as the police cars pulled away from the docks. The sound of it on the metal roofs was heavy and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the city itself. The billionaire stood beside his car, watching the flashing red and blue lights fade into the mist. Evan Miles had been taken into custody, but the name he had spoken, Gray, echoed through the billionaire's mind. It was a name he had never heard before, and yet it carried a sense of something ancient and cold, something that existed beyond revenge or greed. Ava stood beside him under a black umbrella that was far too large for her small frame. Her eyes followed the last police car as it disappeared into the rain. "Is he going to jail?" she asked quietly. "Yes," the billionaire said. "But he might help the police find the people behind all of this." The girl tilted her head. "Do you think that name he said, Gray, is real?" He nodded slowly. "I think it is real enough to find." The ride back into the city was quiet. The sound of the rain against the car windows filled the silence between them. The billionaire's thoughts were tangled. Every new truth seemed to open another door, another question. Who was Gray? Why target him now? And how had a little girl been the one to uncover everything his wealth and security could not? Ava spoke softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Sometimes bad people hide behind other people," she said. "They let someone else take the blame, so they can stay safe." He looked at her with quiet surprise. "You have seen a lot for someone your age." She smiled faintly. "You can see more when people think you are too small to notice." He turned his gaze back to the rain-covered streets. The truth of her words cut deeper than she knew. For years, he had lived surrounded by noise, meetings, deals, promises, but none of it had ever made him listen. It had taken a whisper from a child to make him truly hear. When they reached the tower, the building looked different. The polished glass reflected the gray sky like a wound trying to close. Security guards stood near the entrance, alert but uneasy. The billionaire stepped out of the car and looked up at the high floors. His office was dark, just as he had left it. Ava followed close behind him as they entered the lobby. It smelled faintly of cleaning products and coffee. The world moved on, pretending nothing had happened, but everyone knew something had. Every eye that met his carried a mix of fear and curiosity. As they rode the elevator up, Ava looked at her reflection in the glass walls. "Do you still work here?" she asked. He smiled weakly. "Yes, for now." The elevator doors opened to the top floor. The air was cool and still, like the building was holding its breath. The billionaire walked toward his office and paused by the doorway. The desk was empty, the floor spotless, but the memory of that blinking red light would never leave him. Ava stepped closer to the window and looked down at the city. "It looks different from up here," she said. "Smaller." He nodded. "It used to make me feel powerful," he said. "Now it just makes me feel responsible." She turned to him. "You cannot fix everything," she said gently. "No," he agreed, "but I can start with what I broke." There was a knock at the door. His assistant entered, carrying a tablet. "Sir," he said. The police sent over the first round of decrypted messages from Evan Miles's computer. The billionaire took the tablet and began to scroll through the messages. Most were short and coded, but one stood out. It read, "Phase 1 complete. Move forward with acquisition under Gray's directive. Primary asset will be transferred after confirmation of incident." He looked up sharply. "This was not just about revenge," he said. "They were planning to take over the company." The assistant frowned. "Should we go to the authorities?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I need to know who Gray really is first." Ava watched him quietly, her small hands gripping the strap of her bag. "Maybe Gray is not a person," she said. "Maybe it is something else." He looked at her, puzzled. What do you mean? She shrugged. My grandma says sometimes bad things hide behind good names. Maybe Gray is a group, or a place, or something people use so no one finds out who they really are. The billionaire stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You might be right. The storm outside grew louder, lightning flashing across the sky. He turned off the tablet and walked to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like tears. The reflection of the city lights looked fractured and uncertain, just like everything he thought he understood. Ava moved closer to him, her voice soft but clear. Do you think they will come back? He did not answer right away. If they do, he said finally, we will be ready this time. The girl nodded. Good, she said, because I think the whisper is not finished yet. Her words sent a chill through him. He realized she was right. The danger had not ended with the arrest of Evan Miles. It had only shifted shape. Somewhere out there, Gray was still watching, waiting for another move. As thunder rolled across the sky, the billionaire made himself a silent promise. He would uncover the truth no matter how deep it ran, no matter how far it reached. And though he did not say it aloud, he knew one thing for certain: he would not be doing it alone. The girl who had whispered the truth had become his unexpected ally, the one voice that had broken through the noise of power and fear. Outside, the storm began to ease, but the city lights still flickered like small warnings in the distance. The whisper had become a promise, and before long, that promise would echo across the world he thought he controlled. The following morning arrived pale and quiet, as if the city itself was tired from the storm. The streets were still wet, reflecting the gray sky and the long lines of cars that moved slowly through the downtown district. Inside his office, the billionaire sat at his desk, staring at a single word written in the corner of his notepad: Gray. He had spent the night digging through every document, every file, and every transaction that could hold a clue. There were no names, no photographs, no fingerprints, just whispers in coded messages and money trails that disappeared into silence. Whoever Gray was, they were careful, they were patient, and they had been close for longer than he wanted to admit. The sound of the elevator door opening broke his concentration. Ava stepped in, holding her cloth bag and a paper cup of hot chocolate. Her shoes squeaked softly on the marble floor. She looked small against the vast windows, but her presence filled the room with something he had not felt in a long time: calm. Good morning, she said. He smiled faintly. Good morning, Ava. She climbed into the chair across from him and took a careful sip from her cup. You did not sleep again, did you? She asked. He shook his head. No, I could not. There are too many questions left. She looked at the word written on his notepad. That is the name from last night, she said. Gray. Yes, he replied. And I still do not know if it is a person, a company, or something else. Ava thought for a moment. If you cannot find them, maybe you have to make them come to you. He raised an eyebrow. And how would I do that? She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but confident. You said they wanted your company, right? Then make them think they can still get it. Her words caught him off guard. The simplicity of her idea was almost unsettling. You mean set a trap, he said. She nodded. My grandma says when you cannot see the fox, you leave out the food. He leaned back in his chair, staring at her in quiet amazement. Your grandmother sounds like she would make a great strategist. She just hates liars, Ava said matter-of-factly. He smiled at that, then turned his gaze toward the city outside. Maybe she was right. Maybe the only way to uncover Gray was to give them what they wanted, or at least let them think they could have it. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Michael, he said to his assistant, I want to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I will be making a major announcement about a leadership change in the company. Michael's voice came through the speaker, uncertain. A leadership change, sir? Yes, the billionaire said. Tell the media that I will be stepping down as chief executive officer. Ava's eyes widened. You are leaving? He shook his head. No, I am pretending to. If Gray is watching, they will not be able to resist making their move. Ava nodded slowly. Then you have to be ready when they do. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. Security was tightened around the building. Background checks were reopened for every senior employee. The billionaire worked quietly, saying little, but his mind moved like a machine, sharp, methodical, unstoppable. That night, as the city lights flickered across the glass walls, he sat alone once more. He reread Ava's words written in her uneven handwriting on a piece of paper she had left before going home. Truth always finds a way to speak. He set the note beside his phone and closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost hear her voice in the quiet room, small but steady, echoing like a promise. The next morning, the press conference drew a crowd larger than he expected. Reporters filled the marble lobby, their cameras flashing like sparks. The billionaire stood behind a simple podium, his expression calm. His voice, when he began to speak, was steady and deliberate. After many years leading this company, I have decided to take a step back from daily operations, he said. In the coming weeks, I will begin the process of transferring leadership responsibilities to a new partner who shares our vision for the future. The room filled with murmurs and flashes of light. Every word he spoke was designed to sound final, convincing, but underneath it all lay the trap. Later that afternoon, back in his office, he watched the press coverage play on the television. The announcement had spread everywhere. He turned the volume down and waited. It did not take long. His phone buzzed with an email from an address he did not recognize. The message contained only 3 words. "We are ready." He felt a chill run through him. There was no signature, no contact information, but the tone was clear. They had taken the bait. A knock on the door made him turn. Ava stepped inside again, this time holding a folder the detective had sent over. "The police said they found something else," she said. "It is about the money." He opened the folder. Inside were transaction records, funds wired to shell companies, all leading to a single offshore account. The account name was Gray Holdings. He looked up at her. "You were right again," he said softly. "Gray is not a person. It is a network." Ava's eyes widened. "Then it is bigger than we thought." "Yes," he said, "but now we know where to look." He walked toward the window, the city sprawling beneath him like a chessboard. The pieces were in motion now, and every move counted. Behind him, Ava spoke again. "What happens next?" He turned and looked at her. "Next," he said, "we listen for the next whisper." Outside. The sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It touched the city in pale gold, warming the glass and steel. Somewhere deep inside him, the billionaire knew that the battle was not over, but for the first time, he also knew he was not fighting it alone. The girl who once whispered of danger had become his compass toward truth, and together, they would follow that whisper until the storm itself was silent. The day after the press conference began, with sunlight breaking through thin clouds, the city seemed calm again, unaware that a trap had just been set beneath its quiet rhythm. Inside the tower, the billionaire walked through the lobby with a sense of focus that drew everyone's eyes. Some whispered about his decision to step down, others questioned it aloud, but he said nothing. His silence was part of the plan. When he entered his office, the room already felt different. The blinds were half open, letting in streaks of gold light. His desk was covered with reports, emails, and the folder that held the name which haunted every page, Gray Holdings. He stood there for a long moment, looking at it, thinking about how something so dangerous could hide behind something so ordinary. A knock sounded at the door. Ava stepped in quietly, holding a small paper bag. "I brought you breakfast," she said. He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Ava. You are becoming my best advisor and now my chef." She laughed softly. "You need to eat. My grandma says even smart people think better with food in their stomach." He took the bag and sat down. "Your grandmother is right again." As he ate, Ava sat across from him, swinging her legs gently. "Did they write to you again?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. Late last night, another message came from the same address. It said, 'The transition begins tomorrow. They think I am really stepping down.'" Her eyebrows lifted. "So they are going to move soon?" "I believe so," he said. "They will try to move the money, take control of the accounts, and install their own person inside. That is when we catch them." Ava thought for a moment. "How will you do that?" He leaned forward. "We will let them come to us. The police already have the communication lines traced. Once they make contact again, every message they send will lead straight back to their servers." "No." Ava nodded. understanding more than most adults might have. "You are listening for the whisper again," she said quietly. He looked at her with a smile that reached his tired eyes. "Yes, and this time, we will not miss it." The rest of the day moved slowly, as if the world was waiting for something. The billionaire spent hours in meetings, pretending everything was normal. His team talked about future plans, budgets, and charity events, unaware that he was watching for a signal that could change everything. By afternoon, the first message came. It appeared as an automated transfer notification from the company's financial department. At first glance, it looked routine, but the code hidden in the transaction numbers told a different story. It matched one of the strings from Gray Holdings. He called Michael, his assistant. "Freeze this transfer immediately," he ordered. "Do not alert anyone. Just hold it for review." Michael nodded. Understood. As the call ended, the billionaire turned toward the window. The city looked peaceful, almost fragile. It was strange how corruption could move quietly beneath something so beautiful. Ava arrived again near evening. She carried her worn cloth bag, but today she had added a small notebook inside. "I drew something," she said, opening it on the desk. It was a sketch of the tower, surrounded by tiny figures, some in light, some in shadow. At the top, she had written in careful letters, "Truth has stairs, not elevators." He looked at the drawing for a long moment, then smiled. "That is very wise," he said. She shrugged. "Grandma said that too. She says when you climb, you get stronger." Her words felt like a quiet echo in his chest. The truth, like those stairs, had to be climbed step by step, no shortcuts. Before he could respond, his computer chimed again. Another message appeared, short and direct. "Final authorization needed from you. Midnight transfer." The timing was perfect. The trap was ready. He picked up the phone and called the detective. "It is happening tonight," he said. "They are making their move at midnight." The detective's voice came through the line, calm but alert. "We will be ready. Keep everything as it is. Do not change the pattern." And after the call ended, he turned to Ava. "You should go home now," he said. "It will be late, and I do not want you here when things start." Ava hesitated. "Can I stay until it is done?" He shook his head gently. "Not tonight. You have already done enough." She looked down for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you promise you will be careful?" "I promise," he said. "And I promise I will call you when it is over." Ava gave him a small, serious nod, then left the room. Her footsteps faded down the hall, leaving the office in silence again. Midnight came slowly. The building was empty except for security staff and the soft hum of computers. The billionaire sat at his desk, staring at the monitor. At exactly 12 o'clock, a small icon appeared on the screen. The transfer request blinked once, then twice, waiting for his confirmation. He pressed the key that activated the decoy system. Hidden inside the confirmation file was a tracer code designed by the police. Within seconds, it began sending data to the authorities, tracing the origin of the request. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, another line of text appeared, one that was not from the police or the company. "You should have stayed silent." The billionaire's breath caught. It was the first direct message from Gray. He did not respond. Instead, he called the detective immediately. "They made contact," he said. "The trace is active." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The city slept, unaware of the quiet war being fought in its tallest building. When he finally ended the call, he looked once more at Ava's drawing on the desk. The small words stared back at him like a promise. "Truth has stairs, not elevators." He whispered to the empty room, "Then we keep climbing." Somewhere far beyond the city, a hidden server began to light up on the police's tracking screens. The name Gray Holdings appeared again, this time linked to a real location. The whisper that started it all had now turned into a voice that the world could finally hear. The following morning began with heavy clouds rolling over the skyline, casting a silver shadow across the city. Inside the tall tower, the billionaire stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had not slept, but he did not feel tired. The events of the night still echoed in his mind, the message from Gray, the successful trace, and the quiet tension that followed. The detective had called just before dawn. The trace had led to a location outside the city, an abandoned communications center near the old industrial district. The signal was strong enough to confirm that Gray Holdings was not just a name, it was an operation. Whoever they were, they had resources, connections, and the ability to move in the shadows. The billionaire turned from the window when he heard a soft knock. Ava stepped inside, holding a thermos of tea and a small paper bag. Her hair was pulled back, and her face looked calm, though her eyes showed worry. "You should be resting," he said gently. "I could not sleep," she replied. "You did not call." He sighed, motioning for her to sit. "I am sorry, Ava. Things moved faster than I expected, but it worked. The police found where they were sending the signals." Her eyes widened slightly. "Then it is almost over?" "Almost," he said. "But we still do not know who Gray really is. The detective believes it might be a group of investors who have been using front companies to control smaller corporations. They wanted mine because of the global contracts we hold." Ava opened the paper bag and placed a sandwich on his desk. "You have to eat," she said softly. "Even heroes get hungry." He smiled faintly. "I am no hero, Ava." She looked at him seriously. "You listened when nobody else did. That makes you one." The words hit him deeper than he expected. For a moment, he was silent. Then he said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." As he ate, Ava looked around the office. The morning light filtered through the glass walls, soft and gray. "What will happen now?" she asked. "The police are preparing to move in on the facility," he said. "They want to catch them before they have time to destroy evidence." Are you going too?" He hesitated. "They asked me to stay here," he said. "But I cannot just sit and wait. This started with me. I need to see it end." Ava frowned slightly. "If you go, you have to be careful." "I will be," he promised. A few hours later, he was standing outside the industrial district with the detective and her team. The air was damp and cold. The building ahead of them was massive, its walls covered in peeling paint and rust. It looked abandoned, but faint traces of power ran through the cables along its side. "This is it," the detective said. "The servers are still active. We move quietly." The billionaire followed them through the narrow corridor that led to the main floor. Inside, the space was filled with old machinery, crates, and computer terminals humming softly in the dim light. The walls were lined with screens displaying streams of code and surveillance images from across the city. "This is not just one operation," the detective whispered. "They have been monitoring multiple companies." The billionaire moved closer to one of the screens. His own office appeared there, frozen on an image of him standing at his desk. A chill ran down his spine. "They were watching me," he said. The detective nodded. For a long time, they continued deeper into the building until they reached a small control room at the back. A single computer sat on a desk, its screen glowing with a message that appeared and disappeared every few seconds. The words were simple, but they carried weight. "Truth is expensive." The detective frowned. "It is automated. No one is here now." But the billionaire shook his head. "Someone was. They left this message for us." He looked around the room, noticing a small envelope taped beneath the keyboard. He pulled it free and opened it. Inside was a single flash drive labeled "For him." The detective looked at him. "Do not plug that in here. It could be a trap." He nodded. "I will open it at the office." As they exited the building, the detective radioed her team to secure the site. Rain began to fall again, steady and soft. The billionaire looked up at the sky, feeling the drops against his face. It was strange how something so natural could still feel cleansing after days filled with deceit. Back at the tower, Ava was waiting in his office, sitting by the window with her notebook open. When he walked in, she stood quickly. "You found them?" "Yes," he said, "but they were gone." He placed the flash drive on the desk. "This was left for me." Ava stepped closer. "Are you going to open it?" "Yes," he said, "but carefully." He connected the drive to a separate computer. The screen flickered, and a video began to play. The image was dark, but a voice came through, clearly a man's voice, deep and calm. "You built your empire on control," the voice said. "You thought the world would bend to your rules, but truth is not loyal. It belongs to no one. You should have stayed silent." The video ended abruptly, leaving only static. Ava's eyes were wide. "That is the same thing the message said last night." He nodded slowly. It is their warning. They are not finished. The girl's voice softened. Then neither are we. He looked at her, and for the first time, he smiled not with relief, but with quiet resolve. You are right, he said. We finish this together. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the city glistening beneath the soft gray light. Somewhere beyond the glass, the whisper of truth was still moving through the air, unseen but alive. It had started with fear and a single warning from a brave child. Now, it had become something greater. A promise that truth, once spoken, could not be silenced. The afternoon light slanted through the glass walls of the tower, turning the office into a quiet reflection of gold and shadow. The billionaire sat behind his desk, the flash drive still resting beside the keyboard. The message on it had ended hours ago, but its words continued to echo inside his mind. Truth is not loyal. It belongs to no one. It was both a threat and a philosophy, and it told him everything he needed to know about Gray. They were not driven by revenge or justice. They were driven by control. Across from him, Ava sat cross-legged in a chair, sketching in her small notebook. She had been silent for a while, her pencil moving in slow, thoughtful lines. The sound of graphite against paper filled the room, steady and grounding. What are you drawing? He asked finally. She lifted her head slightly. The tower, she said, but this time, I am drawing it with roots. He frowned with curiosity. Roots? She nodded. Everything that grows tall needs something strong underneath it. Otherwise, it falls. Her words settled deep in him. He leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the city that had once seemed unshakable. Maybe that is where I went wrong, he said quietly. I built everything high but forgot what kept it standing. Ava looked up from her notebook. You can still fix it, she said. You are not finished yet. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed sharply. The detective's name appeared on the screen. He picked it up immediately. We just finished going through the servers, the detective said. Gray Holdings is connected to a larger group called the Meridian Foundation. They are based offshore, and they have been acquiring companies through blackmail and hidden buyouts. Your company was just one step in a much bigger plan. The billionaire's grip on the phone tightened. Can you track them? We are trying, she said. But every time we get close, the data reroutes through multiple countries. They have layers of protection. He glanced at the flash drive on the desk. They wanted me to find that message, he said. They are playing a game. That may be true, the detective replied. But they slipped up this time. One of their offshore accounts made a transfer right after the video ended. The funds moved through a bank in Zurich. We are coordinating with the authorities there now. He exhaled slowly. Thank you. Keep me updated. After ending the call, he looked at Ava. She was watching him closely. It is bigger than I thought, he said. They are part of something international. Ava tilted her head. Then why did they start with you? He thought for a moment. Maybe because they knew I would not look away. Or maybe because they thought I would be too proud to see the danger until it was too late. She closed her notebook and stood up. Then they do not know you very well, she said simply. Her words brought a faint smile to his face. No, he said, they do not. The rest of the afternoon moved slowly. Reporters called for statements. Investors demanded explanations. Every sound in the office felt like static, but beneath it all, he could feel something shifting inside him. For years, he had been a man defined by numbers, power, and deals. But now he was beginning to understand something deeper, the value of truth, and the cost of ignoring it. As evening approached, he and Ava stood by the large window, watching the city below. The sky was painted in streaks of amber and rose, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, even the hard edges of glass and concrete. Do you think Gray will stop? Ava asked quietly. He shook his head. No, people like that never stop until someone makes them. She looked at him, her small face thoughtful. Then you will have to be the one. He looked down at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. Why do you believe I can? Because you already did once, she said. You stopped the bomb. You stopped the lie. You listened when nobody else did. He said nothing for a long moment. The girl's faith in him was something he did not fully understand, but it felt like the anchor he had been missing. Later that night, long after Ava had gone home, the billionaire sat in the dim glow of his desk lamp, reviewing the files one more time. The data from Zurich had arrived. Hidden inside the financial logs was a list of names, each attached to offshore companies connected to Gray Holdings. Some of the names were unfamiliar, but one stopped him cold. It was the name of a board member who had worked beside him for more than 10 years. He stared at it for a long moment, his heartbeat slowing. Betrayal, he realized, often came dressed as loyalty. He called the detective immediately. "I found one of them," he said. "Someone on my own board." The detective's voice grew firm. "Send us everything. We will issue a warrant by morning." He sent the files, then closed his laptop. The office was quiet again. The only sound was the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. As he stood and walked to the window, he thought of Ava's drawing the tower with roots. Maybe this was what rebuilding looked like. Not tearing everything down, but planting something stronger beneath it. The city lights shimmered far below, bright and alive. Somewhere out there, Gray was still watching, still waiting, but he no longer felt afraid. The truth had already started to grow roots, and soon, it would break through the surface. He whispered to the night, almost as if speaking to Ava, "We keep climbing, one truth at a time." And in that quiet moment, the tower no longer felt like a monument to power. It felt like a promise, one that began with a whisper, and would end only when the last shadow had been brought into the light. The next morning arrived gray and cool, the kind of morning when the city seemed to hold its breath before the rush of the day. Inside the tower, the billionaire sat at his desk with a cup of untouched coffee beside him. The list of names from the Zurich files was open on the screen, and the one that mattered most stared back at him like a wound that would not close. It was the name of a man he had trusted for more than a decade, his own chief financial officer, Daniel Rhodes. Daniel had been beside him since the beginning, the man who knew every number, every risk, and every secret of the company. The betrayal was not just professional, it was personal. The billionaire's hands tightened slightly as he read the file again. Daniel's signature was on multiple transactions connected to Gray Holdings. The pattern was deliberate. Every path led back to him. A knock came at the office door. Ava stepped inside, her small frame carrying the kind of calm that only she seemed to have. She was wearing her blue jacket and holding her worn cloth bag. "You did not sleep again," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "You sound like my conscience." "Maybe I am," she said, setting the bag down. "Did you find something?" He nodded. "Yes, someone on my team was working with Gray. Someone I trusted." Ava's eyes widened. "The man who sits beside you during meetings?" He nodded again. "Daniel Rhodes. He was like family to me. I never imagined he could do something like this." Ava sat down across from him. "Sometimes people change when they forget what they wanted in the beginning," she said. "My grandma says greed is just fear wearing a fancy coat." The billionaire looked at her, surprised at the wisdom that came so easily from her. "Your grandmother sounds like she has seen everything." She says you do not need to see everything to understand what matters," Ava replied softly. He nodded slowly. Then, maybe she is right again. He picked up his phone and called the detective. "We found our man," he said. "Daniel Rhodes. He is the connection." The detective's voice was firm. "Do not confront him yet. We are sending officers to handle it. Stay in your office until we arrive." He agreed, though part of him wanted to face Daniel himself. He ended the call and turned back to Ava. "The police are coming," he said. "They will take care of it." Ava looked toward the window. The morning light was turning brighter, bouncing off the glass towers outside. "Will you fire him?" she asked. He exhaled. "I do not think I need to. By the time this is over, he will have to answer to the law." Minutes passed like hours. The air inside the office felt heavier than usual. The billionaire kept glancing at the clock, waiting for the detective to arrive. Then, suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel himself. "We need to talk. Alone. 10 minutes." The billionaire stared at the screen. His pulse quickened. He looked at Ava. "He knows," he said. "Are you going to meet him?" she asked. "I have to," he said. "If I do not, he might run." Ava frowned. "Then I am coming with you." He shook his head. "No, you stay here where it is safe." Her expression was serious, but she nodded. "Okay, but promise me you will be careful." "I promise," he said. He left the office and took the elevator to the lower level of the building. The air in the underground parking lot was cool and still. Daniel was standing near one of the concrete pillars, his suit slightly disheveled, his eyes tired but sharp. "Daniel," the billionaire said quietly. "Why?" Daniel gave a bitter smile. "You would not understand. You built everything, and I built you. But in the end, it was all in your name. I was never more than your shadow. You had everything," the billionaire said. "Money, power, respect. Why throw it away?" Daniel's voice rose slightly. "Because it was never mine. You took all the credit while I did the work. Gray offered me a chance to have what you had. I took it." The billionaire shook his head slowly. "And you were willing to destroy everything for that?" Daniel's face hardened. "You destroyed me first." The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. The police had arrived. Daniel's eyes darted toward the noise, then back to the billionaire. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes." The billionaire's voice was calm but cold. "Then tell me." Daniel hesitated, his eyes flickering with something like regret. "Gray is not just a group of people. It is a network built by those who think they own truth itself. They do not destroy companies, they reshape them. You were just one piece of their plan." Before the billionaire could respond, officers surrounded them. Daniel raised his hands slowly, his expression unreadable. As they handcuffed him, he looked at the billionaire one last time. "You can arrest me, but you cannot stop them. They will come for you next." The billionaire watched silently as Daniel was led away. The sound of the cuffs clicking echoed through the concrete walls. When he returned to his office, Ava was waiting by the window. "Is it over?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, Ava, it is just beginning." She walked up beside him, looking out at the city. "Then we keep going," she said softly. "One truth at a time." He smiled faintly. "Yes," he said. "That is exactly what we will do." Outside, the clouds began to part, and sunlight broke through once more, spreading across the skyline. It felt like the calm before another storm, but this time he was ready. He looked down at the small girl beside him and realized something profound. Truth had not just saved his life. It had given him something he had lost long ago: purpose. And as the morning light filled the office, he knew that no matter how powerful Gray was, they had already made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the strength of a whisper. The afternoon sun was high when the news broke. Every financial network and online headline carried the same story. Daniel Rhodes, the chief financial officer of one of the largest corporations in the country, had been arrested for corporate espionage and fraud. Images of Daniel being escorted by officers filled television screens across the city. The billionaire watched in silence from his office, his reflection faint against the glass. The story was public now. What had been whispered in secret had turned into noise heard by everyone, but the noise did not bring peace. The billionaire knew Daniel's words were not a bluff. Gray was still out there, watching. They had lost a pawn, not the game. Ava sat quietly in the chair across from him, her knees pulled close to her chest. She looked at the television screen for a long moment before asking softly, "Is he going to stay in jail forever?" He shook his head. "No, not forever, but long enough for the truth to come out." She nodded, still staring at the screen. "He looked sad," she said, "like someone who forgot what good feels like." He turned to her, surprised. "You see things that most people miss." Ava shrugged. "Sometimes you can see sadness better than you can see lies." He leaned back in his chair, her words lingering in the quiet air. "You are right again," he said. Just then, his assistant entered, holding a folder and a tablet. "Sir," he said, "the police have sent over Daniel's final statement. There is also something you should see." The billionaire took the tablet. On the screen was a transcript of Daniel's interrogation. His eyes moved quickly across the lines. At first, it was full of denial, anger, and silence. But near the end, one paragraph stood out. "They told me the company was only the beginning. They said once they had control, they would rewrite the rules of truth itself. Gray is not one person, not one place. It is an idea, and ideas do not die." The billionaire closed the tablet slowly. His expression did not change, but inside, something heavy settled deeper. Ava looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means they are not finished," he said quietly. "They believe they can control truth itself." Ava frowned. Nobody can do that. He smiled faintly. That is what I used to believe. She tilted her head. But truth is not something you can own, she said softly. It is like air. It belongs to everyone. He nodded. Exactly. That is what makes it powerful and dangerous to people who fear it. Outside, clouds began to gather again. The light in the office dimmed as the sky turned gray. The billionaire stood and walked to the window. They will try to strike again, he said. Daniel warned me they would. Ava followed him, standing beside his desk. Then you have to warn people, she said. Tell them what is happening. He looked down at her. If I tell them now, they will think it is just another scandal. People forget fast. They believe what is loud, not what is true. Ava thought for a moment. Then you have to make the truth louder. Her words carried the same quiet certainty that had saved him once before. He turned to her fully. How do I do that? She looked up at him with a steady gaze. You let people see who you really are. Not the man in the newspapers. The real one. He smiled. You think they will listen to that man? They will if he listens first, she said simply. Her words hit him harder than any headline. He had spent years building a world where he talked, commanded, and directed but never truly listened. The irony was not lost on him that the smallest voice in his life had been the only one to reach him. That evening, he made a decision. He called his public relations team and scheduled an interview for the following day. No scripts, he said firmly. No rehearsed answers. I will speak honestly. The assistant looked nervous. Sir, are you sure? This could affect the company's reputation. He nodded. It already has. Now it is time to affect its conscience. When the call ended, Ava was still sitting quietly, watching him. You are going to tell the truth, she said. Yes, he replied. All of it. She smiled. Then they will see what I saw. The next day, the interview aired live. The billionaire sat under the bright studio lights, facing the reporter. Cameras rolled, broadcasting his words across the country. I made mistakes, he said. I believed control was safety, and that power could protect the truth. But truth does not belong to power. It belongs to courage, and sometimes courage comes from the smallest voice. At that moment, the screen behind him showed a still image, the photo of a little black girl in a faded hoodie, holding her cloth bag, standing in the middle of a busy lobby. He looked at the photo, then back at the camera. That voice saved my life, he said softly. And because of her, I am listening now. The studio fell silent. Even through the cameras, people could feel the weight of those words. When the interview ended, messages began to pour in, some supportive, some doubtful, but all listening. For the first time, the billionaire felt something stronger than fear. It was hope. That evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, Ava and her grandmother watched the broadcast from their small living room. The old woman smiled gently. He found his way back, she said. Ava nodded. The whisper worked. Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. It always does, child. The truth never shouts first. It begins with a whisper strong enough to change a heart. And as the light faded from the television screen, the little girl smiled because she knew that the whisper she had spoken in fear had become something far greater than she ever imagined. It had become a voice that carried across a world that finally began to listen. The next morning, the city woke up to something unusual, a sense of quiet admiration. Every major newspaper carried a version of the same headline, "The Billionaire Who Chose Truth Over Power." Television channels replayed clips from his interview, and people across the country debated his words. Some doubted his sincerity, others praised his courage, but for the first time, people were talking about integrity instead of scandal. In a small apartment on the east side, Ava and her grandmother sat at their breakfast table. The television hummed softly in the background. The grandmother poured warm tea into 2 chipped cups and smiled faintly as she watched the replay. He kept his promise, she said. Ava nodded, her eyes bright. He told the truth. Her grandmother reached over and squeezed her hand. And you helped him find it. Ava looked thoughtful. Do you think people really change, Grandma? The old woman smiled knowingly. Sometimes they do not. But when they do, it is because someone reminded them who they were before they got lost. Ava glanced at the television again. The billionaire's calm face filled the screen as he spoke about rebuilding his company with transparency and accountability. To the rest of the world, it looked like redemption. To Ava, it looked like something even bigger, the return of kindness to a place that had forgotten it. Across town, in the tall tower that once felt like a fortress, the billionaire stood in the same office where it all began. The sunlight filtered through the glass, softer now, less sharp. It no longer felt like a cage of power, it felt like a window to possibility. He was no longer a man haunted by what had been hidden, but one driven by what could be revealed. He looked down at the stack of letters on his desk. They had come in overnight, hundreds of messages from employees, citizens, and strangers. Some were skeptical, others heartfelt. But one letter caught his attention. The handwriting was uneven, small, and familiar. It was from Ava. He opened it carefully. Inside was a short note written in pencil. "Dear Mr. Grandma says when people start telling the truth, it makes room for other people to do the same. I think your voice made more space for the world to breathe. Please do not stop listening." From Ava. He smiled as he read the words again, his eyes softening. It was a child's letter, simple and pure, but somehow it carried more weight than any speech he had given. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "I want to set up a foundation," he said. "Something that helps children who speak up, children like Ava." His assistant sounded surprised. "What kind of foundation, sir?" "The kind that gives small voices a microphone," he replied. "We will fund education, legal support, and protection for children who report wrongdoing or danger. No more whispers lost in fear." There was a pause on the line before the assistant said quietly, "That is a powerful idea." The billionaire smiled faintly. "It is Ava's idea. I am just listening." By afternoon, the news of the new foundation began to spread. Some called it a publicity move, others a redemption act. But for him, it was neither. It was a promise, an unspoken one, to the girl who had saved him from the silence he had built around himself. That evening, he visited Ava and her grandmother. The apartment was small but warm, filled with the comforting smell of baked cornbread. The grandmother opened the door, her eyes kind but cautious. "You found your way here again," she said. He nodded. "I had to. I wanted to thank you both." Ava came running from the kitchen, her eyes wide with surprise. "You came back," she said, smiling. He knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "I keep my promises," he said, "and I wanted to tell you something important." She tilted her head. "What is it?" He handed her a folded paper. "This is the start of something new. I am naming the foundation after you." Her eyes widened. "After me?" "Yes," he said. "It will be called the Ava Trust. It will help children who see the truth but are too afraid to speak. You reminded me that sometimes the smallest voice carries the biggest truth." Ava looked down at the paper in her hands, then back up at him. "Will it help other kids like me?" "That is the plan," he said. "Every voice matters, and I want the world to remember that." Her grandmother's eyes glistened as she listened. "You are doing something good, mister," she said softly. "But do not forget, truth has to stay alive in the small things too." He nodded. "I will remember that." As he left the apartment later that evening, the city felt different. The air was cooler, and the lights along the street seemed softer. He could hear laughter from nearby homes, the sound of people sharing meals, stories, and ordinary truths. It was the kind of noise he used to ignore, but now it felt like music. In the car ride back to the tower, he looked out at the skyline. It was still tall and proud, but he no longer felt the same need to own it. He had built the city's tallest building, but it was a little girl's whisper that had made him finally feel tall inside. Back in his office, he placed Ava's letter in a glass frame on his desk. It sat beside his computer, the one reminder he wanted in sight at all times. As the night deepened, he whispered to himself, "She made space for the world to breathe." And for the first time, the man who once lived in silence felt something simple and steady inside him, peace. Far away, in a small apartment lit by a single lamp, Ava sat beside her grandmother, writing another letter in her notebook. "Dear Mister, you kept listening. That means the world is still whispering. Do not stop hearing it." She smiled, folded the note, and placed it inside her bag. The story that began with a warning had become something else entirely, a promise that truth, once spoken with kindness, could keep growing long after the whisper faded. The morning after the Ava Trust was announced, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the tower like a quiet blessing. The billionaire stood in his office, watching the city move below him. Cars streamed along the avenues, people hurried across crosswalks, and the world seemed to breathe again. But this time, he felt connected to it not as its ruler, but as part of its rhythm. The phone on his desk buzzed softly. His assistant's voice came through, calm but excited. "Sir, the Ava Trust has already received more than 500 messages. Parents, teachers, even children. They are sending stories, drawings, and thank you notes." He smiled faintly. "Good, let them all be read. Every voice deserves to be heard." He ended the call and turned back to the window. His reflection in the glass looked different now, less sharp, less distant. The man who once measured worth in wealth was slowly learning to measure it in truth. A knock sounded at the door. When he opened it, Ava was standing there, her cloth bag slung over her shoulder, her smile bright and easy. "I brought you something," she said, stepping inside. He smiled, surprised but pleased. "You always bring me something." She held up a small envelope. "It is from the kids at my school. They heard about the Ava Trust. They wanted to thank you." He took the envelope carefully and opened it. Inside were drawings, crayon, pictures of children holding hands, of books, of a globe with little stick figures standing around it. At the bottom of one drawing, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "We can all be brave." He felt something tighten in his chest. "They understand more than we give them credit for," he said softly. Ava nodded. "Kids always do. Grown-ups just forget to listen." Her words carried that simple truth again, the one that cut through noise and pretense. He looked down at her and smiled. "Then it is a good thing you keep reminding us." She shrugged. "It is what I do." They sat together by the wide window. The city shimmered in the morning light, and for a moment, silence filled the space, not heavy like before, but peaceful. After a while, Ava asked, "Are you still afraid of gray?" He thought for a moment before answering. "I am not afraid," he said, "but I am not finished with them either. They are still out there, and what they wanted to control was not just my company, it was the idea that truth could be owned." Ava frowned slightly. "But nobody owns the truth." He smiled at her clarity. "No, they do not, but some people try. That is why the work is not over." Ava swung her legs softly against the chair. "Then maybe the Ava Trust can help with that too. You said it is about voices. Maybe it can protect truth, not just people." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You have a way of seeing things before the rest of us do, Ava." She grinned. "Grandma says that is because I listen more than I talk." He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "I think the whole world could use more of that." Later that day, they went together to the first office of the Ava Trust. It was not inside the tower, but in a smaller building near the city's edge, bright walls, open windows, and shelves filled with books and art supplies. The staff greeted Ava like a small celebrity. Her story had already spread far beyond the city. A young journalist waiting outside approached them. "Miss Ava," she said with a smile, "how does it feel to have something this big named after you?" Ava looked up at her calmly. "It feels like a promise," she said. "Not mine, everyone's." The journalist smiled, visibly moved. "That is a beautiful answer." The billionaire stood beside Ava, listening proudly. He realized that for the first time in years, he was not the center of attention, and he did not want to be. This moment belonged to her, and to what her courage had created. Inside the office, the walls were already covered with letters from children. One was from a small town in Texas, where a boy had written, "I told my teacher the truth today. I was scared, but then I thought of Ava." Another came from a girl in Kenya, who wrote, "Now I know that small voices can matter too." The billionaire read them one by one, his chest tightening with emotion. These were not just letters, they were proof that something real was happening. The whisper had grown into a chorus. When the afternoon sun dipped low, he and Ava stood outside the building. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the city lights were just beginning to flicker on. Ava looked up at him. "Do you think Gray will hear about this?" He nodded. "Yes, and I hope they do, because the one thing they never planned for was people believing in each other." She smiled. "Then we are winning." He returned the smile. "Yes, Ava, we are." That night, back in his office, the billionaire sat alone again, but the loneliness felt different now. The silence was not empty, it was full of life. He looked at the framed letter on his desk, the one Ava had written weeks ago. "Please do not stop listening," he whispered to the quiet room. "I will not." Outside, the city glowed under a soft blanket of light. In small homes, children were writing letters, teachers were reading them aloud, and parents were listening. The Ava Trust had done more than give them a place to speak. It had reminded them that truth was a living thing, carried by every person brave enough to tell it. And in that still moment, the billionaire realized that what started as a whisper from a child had become something unstoppable, a movement rooted not in fear, but in faith. The truth, once fragile, had finally learned how to stand. The following weeks unfolded with a kind of calm the billionaire had not known in years. The Ava Trust was growing faster than anyone expected. Schools, community centers, and even small towns began to open local chapters, each one dedicated to helping children speak truth without fear. For the first time, the billionaire's name was not attached to wealth or controversy, it was attached to hope. Every morning, his assistant brought him stacks of letters from people across the country. Some wrote to thank him, others wrote to share their pain and relief. But most of all, they wrote to thank a little girl named Ava, whose whisper had changed everything. Ava herself visited the Trust's office often. She would walk through the bright halls, listening to the laughter of children drawing on the walls, their crayons leaving colorful trails of courage. The billionaire always made time for her visits, no matter how busy his schedule became. Somehow, when she was there, the noise of the world seemed to quiet itself. On one particular afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the large windows, Ava entered his office holding a newspaper. "You made the front page again," she said, placing it on his desk. He smiled. "What did I do this time?" "They said you are trying to pass a law," she replied proudly. "Something to protect kids who tell the truth." He nodded. "Yes, the Ava Protection Act. It will make sure that no child who reports wrongdoing will ever be punished for their honesty." Ava grinned. "Grandma says that is how real change starts, when the truth gets its own law." He chuckled softly. "Your grandmother has more wisdom than half the people I know." Ava tilted her head. "You still think about Gray, don't you?" His smile faded slightly. "Yes, every day." "Do you think they will come back?" she asked. He looked out the window, his reflection faint in the glass. "They already have," he said quietly. "Just not the way we think." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned to her. "When you take away the power of silence, you take away control from people like them. They will try to twist the truth again, to make people doubt it. But this time, the difference is that we are listening." Ava was quiet for a moment, her small hands tracing the edge of the desk. "You sound tired," she said gently. He nodded. "I am. But it is a good kind of tired. The kind that comes from building something worth keeping." She smiled. "Then you are doing what Grandma calls heart work." He laughed softly. "Heart work?" She nodded seriously. "It is the kind of work that makes your heart feel heavy and happy at the same time." He leaned back in his chair, looking at her with quiet amazement. "Then yes, Ava, that is exactly what this is." Later that evening, as he left the office, he found a small group of reporters waiting outside. One of them called out, "Sir, is it true that your former business partners are trying to block your new law?" He paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, some people still believe truth should be controlled, but truth does not answer to power, it answers to conscience." The cameras flashed, capturing his calm expression against the fading light. That night, as he drove through the city, he saw posters of the Ava Trust displayed on buses, schools, and billboards. Each one carried the same simple line beneath Ava's image: "The smallest voice can change the world." When he arrived home, the house felt different. It was still large and quiet, but no longer lonely. On the coffee table sat a small package wrapped in brown paper. There was no return address, only a note written in careful handwriting: "Keep climbing." Inside the package was a photograph, an old one, black and white. It showed a group of children standing outside a small school, smiling proudly. On the back, someone had written, "The first truth is the hardest to speak, but it opens the way for all the others." He recognized the message immediately. It was Gray. But this time, there was no threat in it. just acknowledgement. He sat back in his chair, the photograph resting on his lap. Maybe Gray was not gone, but they were no longer in control. The power they once held through fear had been broken. The next morning, he took the photograph to the trust office and placed it on the wall beside Ava's framed letter. "This stays here," he told his staff, "to remind us that truth has a long history and a long road ahead." Ava arrived later that day, curious about the new picture. "Who are they?" she asked. He smiled. "People who came before us. People who tried to speak the truth when it was even harder." She nodded slowly. "Then they are part of the whisper too." "Ah." He looked at her, the corners of his eyes softening. "Yes, Ava. Every voice that ever spoke the truth is part of the whisper." Outside, children were planting flowers in the small garden behind the trust building. Their laughter drifted through the open window. The sound was light and unguarded, the kind of sound that only exists when fear has no place left to hide. As the billionaire watched them, he realized that Gray's warning "truth is not loyal" had been wrong all along. Truth was loyal, but not to power or wealth. It was loyal to the hearts that carried it forward, no matter how small or scared they were. He turned to Ava. "You once said the whisper worked. Do you still believe that?" She smiled up at him. "It is still working." And as the two of them stood there, surrounded by sunlight and laughter, the whisper that had once saved his life continued to move through the air, soft, steady, and unstoppable. It had begun as a warning. Now it was a movement, a heartbeat, a legacy. The morning began with soft rain. It wasn't the heavy kind that drowned the city in noise, but the gentle kind that made everything seem quieter, slower, and more thoughtful. The billionaire arrived early at the Ava Trust headquarters, carrying his usual calm but focused expression. He walked through the glass doors and paused for a moment in the lobby. Children's artwork covered the walls, bright crayon drawings of hearts, hands, and words like truth, courage, and listen. Each drawing felt like a small light in a world that still held too much shadow. Upstairs, Ava was already waiting in his office. She was sitting by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Her cloth bag rested beside her, and a few sheets of paper peeked out from its opening. She turned when she heard him enter. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Good morning, Ava," he replied, setting his umbrella by the door. "You are here early." She smiled. "Grandma says the rain is when the world washes its eyes. She told me to come watch it from up high so I can see everything look new." He looked out the window and smiled. "Your grandmother always knows how to turn the world into poetry." Ava nodded, then pulled one of the papers from her bag. "I brought you something," she said. "It is from the kids at the new Ava Trust School. They wanted to say thank you for helping them start their garden." He took the paper and looked at it. It was a letter written in big, colorful handwriting. "Thank you for giving us a place to tell the truth and plant things that grow." He smiled softly. "They understand more than most adults," he said. Ava tilted her head. "That is because kids are not afraid to start over. Grown-ups always think they are supposed to already know everything." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Maybe that is why you were the one who saved us all." She looked down shyly. "I just said what I heard." He nodded. And that was enough. For a few moments, they stood in silence, watching the rain fall harder against the glass. Then the phone on his desk rang. He answered it quickly. It was the detective who had once investigated the Gray case. Her voice was steady, but serious. "Sir," she said, "we found something you should see. It is connected to Gray." His tone sharpened. "What is it?" "A list," she said, "of donors. Some of them are connected to government officials, others to corporations overseas. They were all funding Gray's operations indirectly, but there is more. Some of the money was funneled through charities." The billionaire's stomach tightened. "Are you saying they used charity money to control truth?" "Yes," she said. "They used trust to hide their lies." He closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Send me everything." After hanging up, he sat down slowly, the weight of the discovery settling in. Ava watched him, sensing the heaviness that had entered the room. "Is it Gray again?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said. "But it is different this time. They are not hiding behind fear anymore. They are hiding behind good intentions." Ava frowned. "That is worse." He nodded. "It is. Because it makes people stop asking questions. She climbed down from her chair and walked closer to his desk. Then we just have to keep asking. Her words were simple, but they landed like truth always did, quietly, and then deeply. He smiled faintly. You are right again. Later that day, they met with the board of the Ava Trust. The room was filled with people from different walks of life, teachers, social workers, lawyers, and community leaders. The billionaire stood at the head of the table, holding the file that contained the new information. Gray is not gone, he began. They have changed their face, their methods. They are using the same language we use, truth, compassion, unity, but twisting it for control. We have to make sure what we build here cannot be used against the people we are trying to protect. The room fell silent. Then one of the teachers spoke up. What can we do? The billionaire looked around the table. We make the trust stronger. We make it transparent. Every donation, every action, every decision will be open to the public. No more shadows. Truth has to be seen to stay alive. Ava, who sat at the end of the table, raised her hand timidly. And we can teach the kids to ask questions, she said, even about the people who say they are helping. He nodded proudly. Yes, Ava, especially about them. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed unanimously. The Ava Trust would become the first organization in the country to operate under full public transparency. Every dollar spent, every voice heard, every truth told shared openly for all to see. That evening, as the city lights came on one by one, the billionaire walked Ava home. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of street lamps. She skipped a few steps ahead, her laughter echoing softly in the damp air. Do you think Gray will be mad? She asked suddenly, looking back at him. He smiled. Probably, but that means we are doing something right. She grinned. Grandma says light only bothers people who are hiding. He chuckled. Then we should keep the lights on. When they reached her building, she turned to him with a small wave. Good night, mister. Good night, Ava, he said. And thank you for reminding me to keep asking. She smiled, then ran up the steps, her small figure disappearing into the warm light of the hallway. As he walked back to his car, the billionaire looked up at the sky. The clouds had cleared, revealing faint stars above the city. For the first time in a long while, he felt something stronger than determination. It was peace mixed with purpose. He whispered softly to the night, the whisper is still alive. And somewhere in the distance, a child's voice, clear and steady, seemed to echo in his memory. We can all be brave. The whisper had grown again, not just through one man or one child, but through everyone who dared to keep asking, keep listening, and keep believing that truth, once spoken, would never die. The day of the first Ava Trust celebration arrived under a clear blue sky. The city, once known for its silence and shadows, now pulsed with color and sound. Children, teachers, and families gathered in the open square downtown, where banners waved with words written by small hands, speak kindly, speak bravely, speak truth. The billionaire stood near the stage, dressed simply, with no security detail and no entourage. He was no longer the man who once ruled the skyline from a glass tower. He was simply a listener among many voices. Ava stood beside him, holding a small card in her hands. Her grandmother was there too, smiling proudly from the crowd. When it was time, Ava stepped onto the stage. The microphone was taller than she was, but her voice carried strong and clear. A long time ago, she began, I whispered because I was scared, but someone listened, and that whisper turned into something big. It turned into all of you. The crowd listened quietly, their eyes fixed on the little girl who had unknowingly started a movement. Grandma says truth is like water, Ava continued. It can be quiet or loud, but it always finds a way through, and now it is finding its way through us. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. The billionaire felt something in his chest loosen something he had held for too long. When Ava stepped down, he joined her on the stage and leaned close enough for her to hear. You did beautifully, he said softly. She smiled. We did beautifully. After the ceremony, they walked together through the park where children were planting a new garden in honor of the Ava Trust. The flowers were small now, fragile in the soil, but the billionaire knew they would grow strong. He knelt down to help a child press the dirt around a stem. His hands, once used to signing billion-dollar contracts, now moved gently through the earth. Ava looked at him and said, "You are different now." He smiled. "You made sure of that." "Hi. Do you think Gray is still out there?" she asked. He looked toward the skyline, the light reflecting off the tall buildings. "Maybe," he said. "But the world is louder now. The whisper has too many voices for them to silence." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then we will keep it going." He looked at her, this small, brave girl, who had changed everything with one act of courage, and he knew she was right. The whisper would never fade, because it no longer belonged to either of them. It belonged to everyone who believed that truth, once spoken, could move mountains. As the sun began to set, the city lights flickered on one by one. Children's laughter echoed through the park. The billionaire stood quietly, watching Ava help another child plant a seed. The soil was dark, the petals bright against it, a perfect picture of what truth looked like when it found light. He whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the world itself. "Thank you for the whisper." And somewhere deep in the heart of the city, that whisper answered back, not with words, but with the sound of wind moving through the leaves, with laughter, and with the steady beat of a world that had learned to listen. The truth had not only survived, it had bloomed.